questions and doubts and things we want clarified. There was one of my favorite monks, and I've mentioned him several times to you. He was called Ajahn. And this monk, I also mentioned that he was diagnosed with terminal cancer when I first became a monk. And he lasted about another 30 years before he eventually passed away. But he was such an impressive monk that one day when I heard that he may not live that much longer, I made an effort to go to his monastery and to see him, to ask my questions. I had questions too I wanted to get the answers about. And I had to put my name down on a list and wait 2 or 3 days before I could have an appointment to see him. And when I did eventually get to see him, then I remember going into the room, and there was this really old monk just sitting on a chair, just looking out over to the Mekong River. And that's his monastery was next to the river. And he was so peaceful. And when he looked at me, he was so kind that all my questions vanished. No, it didn't work. It was very strange. You were in front of a very great monk. You waited 2 or 3 days to actually get the opportunity to ask questions, and then all the questions seemed to be so worthless. And instead I just asked him, isn't it better to find a way to answer your own questions? And he said yes. And then I just sat there, just enjoying the peace in his presence. It taught me one amazing thing, that the answer to all questions will never actually come about by words answering words. There comes a time through kindness and through peace. You're so still, so peaceful, and realize you have nothing to prove or nothing to answer. And you get so still and peaceful that all the questions vanish. I always remember that. And I always remember that I just sat there quietly, thinking that they'd probably have to get a whole dozen water buffalo to drag me out of here. Because I was so content and happy just being in the presence of what was a very great monk. And that actually taught me a deeper answer to all the questions you may ever have. Because what one really needs to know is just what peace is, what kindness is, as a feeling. And to know that you're totally 1000% accepted and you don't need anything more, just that peace and that stillness. And from that, all the other answers just come so easily. So, that's the answer to all the questions tonight. So we'll go to bed now. Well, that's a try, but always remember that, because otherwise, sometimes, you can answer the questions very deeply, sometimes superficially. There's always more questions the next day. Let's see how many we can get answered. Dear Ajahn Brahm, Mahasadhu for your wise guidance. I understand that Samma Samadhi mentions the attainment of the 4 jhanas. I also understand that in some sutta there is mention of that attainment of the first jhana allows for the attainment of at least sotapanna. Actually, I've never actually seen that in the suttas, but it seems to make a lot of sense. Similarly, too, for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th jhanas, basically any one of those jhanas is sufficient to actually see oneself, see suffering, see what the nature of the mind is, and also to thereby know that you've lost so many defilements that you qualify, is that people can call you anything, it's a sotapanna. Kindly elaborate on the attainment of sotapatti. Sotapatti is being a sotapanna. when a practitioner is able to attain the first jhana or reaching Sotapanna is certainty of ultimate awakening with metta. First of all, Sotapatti, these are just like the words in Pali. Sotapanna is like a noun. Sotapatti is a past participle, having achieved Sotapanna. It's just the language of Pali. It's not a word which has a different meaning. The same as Nibbutta is like a past participle used as an adjective. Nibbānat, extinguished. Nibbāna is like the noun. But it's the same meaning. So what that really means is if you have just the best simile of the tadpole and the frog has left the water. And so the understanding of the water is totally different than it's ever been before. It's also one of the reasons why when the tadpole has left the water as a frog for the first time, she has such a difficult task trying to explain it. It's something which has been beyond what other people have experienced, and so the language is very tough to answer. And the language is very hard to actually get a proper description of it. If any of you, I know this monk who did manage to get many of these attainments, and then when he saw the way the Buddha described these things, sometimes it was kind of gobsmacked, just how powerful the descriptions of the Buddha were. He certainly had, this is a weird thing to say, but the Buddha certainly had those attainments, but also knew how to explain them as clearly as possible. And that's a tough thing to be able to do. Sometimes that people have experiences of these things, and sometimes you have to question them and ask until they fill in all the descriptions more accurately. And you say, okay, yes, certainly. That was the first jhana, or certainly that was the second jhana. And so you can see it's difficult for people to explain these things. So that's one of the difficulties there. But usually when the five senses vanish, and I can write it down anyways, but don't worry, you'll remember these things. The five senses vanish and they get way beyond you. So, you can't hear sounds, you can't see sights and so on. You can't feel anything in your body. And that what you're experiencing is bliss, not anything which is not sleepiness. You know what sleepiness is, you know what bliss is. The bliss is very powerful. It's a very powerful mental sukha vedana, sukha happiness, pleasure. And it's those pleasures which the Buddha said don't feel afraid of, because they will eventually lead to the attainment of the four paths and fruits, the four stages of enlightenment. And then afterwards, when you come out afterwards, you've had an amazing experience, and you remember that clearly, and you will explore that experience many times later on, in your practice, and soon you'll be able to understand it more fully. And it also helps, if you've had those experiences, to check them out in the suttas, or in the words of people who also have had those experiences. You check them out, and you can soon again see, yes, that was true. And what happens if you're a stream winner? What that means, if you've seen, especially it's not a self in here, not a being, not a driver of the bus. And it's only a matter of the time until that view changes the way you perceive things. And the way you perceive things changes the way you think about things. This is how the right view eventually percolates through every other part of your cognitive process. It's just like sometimes in the old days, people would say that smoking is bad for your health. But they were so used to smoking they could not stop. Remember, this was a story of Ajahn Giacomo's father, who was Italian, and he'd smoke a lot. And he realized it's going to kill him. But then it took a while before that right view eventually changed even the way he felt about smoking and his perception of it. And when that perception and thoughts had changed enough, then he was able to give it up totally. Smoking ceased as part of his practice. This was Ajahn Jacquard's father. And it's the same with everything else in our life. How the Buddha called it, the perversions or distortions of perception and thinking. How we view life, that changes our perceptions, how we interpret things. And how we interpret things, how we perceive things, that changes our thoughts. And our thoughts are like the bricks which build up, our citadels of views. A good idea, a good explanation of that, this teaching of the Buddha about the vipalasas, distortions of perception and view and thought, I could never understand why sensible people, intelligent people, can believe all sorts of weird stuff. I remember there was a view, maybe 60 years ago or so, about that there was a spacecraft behind a comet which was approaching Earth. And if people believed in this guru in, I think it's Jonestown or something in Guyana, and if they believed in it, then they would actually get transported into this spacecraft, and when the Earth would get destroyed, they would survive. And it was such a ridiculous, pseudo-religion. And I thought, how can any rational person ever believe in that? But many did, and these weren't just stupid people. Many of these were successful businessmen, university professors, all sorts of people. I said, how can they do that? Once that right view is kind of established, even for a short time, that changes the way you perceive. And the way you perceive makes you think in that particular way. And those thoughts keep building up to confirm your views. Yeah, it's true. Like we just had Christmas, Santa Claus. Do you believe in Santa Claus? As a kid I did. And why did I believe in it? Well, you were supposed to believe in it, first of all, so that belief was what you started with. And then sometimes, in the middle of the night, the presents appeared in your room, or under a Christmas tree or something. And so I perceived it that way, and those perceptions, of course, were reinforced because when I believed in that, I get some really nice presents, so that sort of supported it. I get rewarded with pleasure, and then it became how you thought. Until later on you saw lots of flaws in that argument. And sometimes not to believe in something you believed in for a long time takes a lot of courage. And that's one of the reasons why people find it hard to discard views. And I was going to mention this earlier, that sometimes in Malaysia and also places like Singapore, in the old days anyway, I'm not quite sure what it's like now, but if you're a Buddhist and you're getting old and you're in hospital because you've got some terminal disease, sometimes your children, they may be born again Christians, and they'll be being the pastor to your bedside, and they'll start harassing you out of love, because they love their grandmother, grandfather, and they really believe that their grandma or grandfather, when they die, if they don't convert to being a Christian, then they will be tortured in hell. And out of love, they don't want you to feel like that. So they're around your bedside for a long time trying to convert you out of concern for you. So what do you do? And I remember we used to discuss this a lot, and I told this solution to the late chief priest, Dr. K.C. Dhammananda. He liked it very, very much. I said, please advise all of your students and followers that if you're on your deathbed and you've got a son or a daughter like that trying to convert you to being a Christian, please convert. Become a Christian. And then they'll be so happy that they converted their mum or their dad, and they will leave to go get some dinner or just to go home and rest. And when they're out of the hospital room, then you can convert back to being a Buddhist. Or done savanangachan, if you convert one way, you can convert the other. That's kind of logical to me. So he liked that. And that's the only way to get rid of them. Yeah. So your children are happy and you're happy. But why do actually people have to believe that? It's because it's reinforced all the time. And because it's reinforced, that means your view becomes pretty solid, even though it's wrong view, it becomes solid. And you need new perceptions to actually start breaking that view, which is one of the reasons why we do our meditation. In a meditation that provides you with a huge number of new views, which are free from wanting or not wanting, and sometimes those views are challenging for you. And things like, you're not in control of things. That's only just an approximation, but it challenges you so much that you have to readjust views on the basis of evidence, and you see things in a different way. And once you start seeing things in a different way, then the thoughts can actually support that new way. And then the view is changed. And once a view is changed, it takes a while for those perceptions and thoughts to be changed. Sometimes another 6 lifetimes. That long. So that's actually why right view comes first. And right perceptions, such as like the right motivations and right thoughts, which can support the right speech, action and livelihood. Why is Ajahn Brahm a monk? There's so many other things I can do in this world. Why do I spend all my time teaching retreats? Can't I do something else? And sometimes, before you start being a monk, you think, this is a silly thing to do. But then once you actually get into it and you actually see the results and you see how these things work, you realize how valuable it is. So this is why eventually your practices of precepts and even understanding what right effort is and what satipatthana is, it all starts to get adjusted from right view until you start to see these things properly as a Buddha saw. And then you see the jhanas and how important they are. All starts with right view. The view is perfected first, it's a stream then eventually when the jhanas get very strong, then that becomes a non-returner. And then eventually that turns into full enlightenment. In brief. Does that make sense? I hope so. Dear Ajahn Brahm, when a dull nimitta occurs during meditation, are we wanting when we zoom into the crystal clear parts, or we just let it be until clear up and become crystal clear by itself? Is nimitta a form of hallucination? Thank you, Ajahn. It's not an hallucination because the nimitta, if you can describe it to me, and you can find out if it's an hallucination or if it's a real nimitta, there are some signs to those nimittas. Other people experience them the same. So people don't hallucinate the same old way, 2 or 3, 4, 5, or a dozen people together. some of those nimittas, you find out exactly how they work, what they are, and part of them is the stronger they are, the weaker is the five senses. You can't hear things. That is one of the great signs of nimittas. Now other people may be talking, you just can't hear them. Or you may start the chanting, but then you don't hear even the chanting. You're deep inside having a wonderful time with the nimitta. And one of the things about should you decide to zoom in on the nimitta, all of these instructions which I'm giving are not to be applied when these things actually happen. The reason why I'm giving little instructions like to zoom in on the most beautiful part of the nimitta is kind of a brainwashing of you. And it's like, say, a tennis player is playing a sort of a tournament. He hasn't got time to decide what to do when he's smashing that ball. It becomes what he's been trained to do many, many, many times in the practices or in the coaching sessions. The coach says, do it this way, do it that way. That's when he thinks. But in the actual matches, it becomes an automatic response. And that's similar to what happens in meditation. Because you've heard me say this so many times, that when you do get to a nimitta, the mind will automatically just zoom in to the most beautiful parts. This is what happened to me. That's why I share this with you. Sometimes I wonder, why did I let go in that manner, on that meditation? Something really nice happened. And I look back upon it afterwards, and I recognize that's what Ajahn told me to do. And it's so weird that I tell the story of many years ago when I gave a very, very well-attended talk, a big talk, over in Singapore. In Singapore, not Malaysia, because in Singapore they could advertise the talks and they didn't get into any trouble with religious other parties. So there's a few thousand people. And imagine, you go into, as in the Suntec City, in that convention centre hall, and when you go in there of an evening, and I started thinking that all the people who are going on to this talk this evening probably have just come straight from work, have rushed their dinner if they've had any dinner, they probably have dinner afterwards, and taking that time off. And I was the only one talking. It was like a one-man show, one monk show, sorry. And there were thousands of them there. And I thought, oh my goodness. Well, number one, it's a huge responsibility. If I don't give a good talk, I'm letting down the Buddha, letting down Ajahn, letting down the Dhamma, and that would really hurt me. But worse, if I gave a good talk, then that could make me proud and arrogant. It's one of the things which I saw many times, that some teachers get into what's called labha, sakara, saloka, gains honour and fame. And that makes them kind of weird. And that's not what I wanted to be. Of the two, I thought, let's give a bad talk, and then I can just go back to the monastery and just be a nice, quiet monk. But then I thought, no, I just really want to do my best. And I solved the problem by understanding, and it was true, understanding that I never give a talk. Even all that you've heard from me is a result of all that training from an Ajahn Chah, from other great monks like Lungta Mahabua and from Ajahn Tate, and all these other great people who trained me when I was young. And sometimes I look back on the talk as I walk back to my room and say, that came from Ajahn Chah. And when you look back upon that, I realise I don't have to worry about the talk, even this retreat. The retreat was taught mostly by Ajahn Chah. Honestly. And that realization made me just relax and just honor my teacher, not honor myself. It makes life so much easier. It's exactly what I do in meditation. If I zoom in to the nice parts and limit it's because Ajahn told me to. It's not my decision. That's where the will comes from. If the story of Gautama, and this is a good question. If the story of Gautama and the prediction of the longevity of the sasana are probably inauthentic, then what about the Garu Dhamma? Are the 8 principles authentic? They are found in the Vinaya Pitaka too. Some of them are. How do monks of Bodhinyana monastery treat the subject matter if it is not too sensitive to be shared? Now, how we treat the matter, first of all, we do have, monks like me, I started this, making sure that when we have something like the Vinaya, the rules for monks and nuns, so we know it well, so that we don't sort of misrepresent it. And, that would be sort of being almost like lying. So first of all, we had to learn it. And then when we started looking at the Vinaya of the Bhikkhuni Vinaya, you found out that was nowhere near as comprehensively explained as the monks' Vinaya. And the reason why was quite obvious, because the Bhikkhuni did sort of lessen a lot, the number of Bhikkhunis, just after the time of the Buddha. And in some countries it did run out. But there were some countries that kept on going. And sadhu, 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 to the Chinese, who kept the Mahayana Bhikkhuni going for such a long time. And the Bhikkhuni of Mahayana, Bhikshuni, which is a Sanskrit word, is close enough to the Theravada Bhikkhuni that they can legitimately assist reinstating the Bhikkhunis into Theravada. So to make it clear to you, say you have let's just stay with a bhikkhu first of all, a monk. You can have a Mahayana bhikkhu, a Theravada bhikkhu, but really they're bhikkhus first. A bhikkhu who follows Theravada, or a bhikkhu who follows Mahayana, but they're bhikkhu first. Their status depends upon their ordination, not the colour of the robes which they wear, nor many of the precepts they keep. And that was wonderful to see, that many bhikkhus and bhikshus, Mahayana version, they're so compatible, and their ordination procedure or process is compatible. Basically, over all those centuries, they've kept the same basic rules. So because of that, you can be a bhikkhu like me, and I can join in a Mahayana temple, their ceremonies, and it's valid. So bhikkhu first, bhikkhuni first, Mahayana Theravada secondary. So even now, in many occasions, say a Korean, South Korean bhikkhu, they can, if they like, say, Bodhinyana monastery, they don't have to reordain as a monk in Bodhinyana monastery. Their ordination in Korea, South Korea, still valid. So they've been 5 or 6 years in South Korea as a monk. They come to Bodhinyana monastery, they continue on, still 5 or 6 years old. So because of that, that's why it's possible to use Mahayana bhikshunis to make the quorum for the Theravada bhikshuni quorum. We're not that different. But I know that even now in many countries, sometimes like even Sri Lanka, I just cannot figure out, and I've been there so many times, how many sects and subsects there are of the different types of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. It's huge numbers. And why can't you all get together and become like a Bhikkhu Sangha, where everybody's included? A lot of times because of politics, and when politics is power and is money. But anyway, that we know that when it comes to things, important things like ordinations and getting monasteries working and going, that we don't have to get to be, we do get to be legalistic, but the legalistic things allows this to happen. And that's one thing. But it's also for things like the Garudhamma. For that, there's many people have looked at cases where, even in the things like the Theravada and Therigata, where it looks like they're doing things which totally are opposed to the Garudhamma. But they were just done and praised. So these days, we advise that the Bhikkhuni Vinaya was basically left to basically not get looked at clearly enough. And if you look at it clearly enough now, a lot of those rules of Bhikkhuni Vinaya are things like this is one of the rules, the Bhikkhuni is always supposed to walk behind other bhikkhus, even if that monk has just been ordained that day. And that bhikkhuni, who is just so senior, so well respected, has to walk behind. But then there's other cases which you find like Venerable Sariputta, making sure that the bhikkhuni walks in front of him. So because of this, there's inconsistency there, but people haven't even bothered trying to figure it out. Why? But now we know that what's the purpose of the Vinaya? One of the purposes of the monks and nuns' rules is to enhance confidence and trust, get inspiration from the people who see monks and nuns. So we want to make sure that that confidence is increased. And so when I teach the Garudhammas to the bhikkhunis, I tell them, are you keeping them as an intelligent woman would keep the Garudhammas in today's world? For the increase in faith, for your own humility, and for the harmony of the groups in which you live. It's using the Garudhammas, but in a way which acknowledges that if you want to have inspiring communities of women, you teach it in such a way that those women know how to behave in a way where everybody feels inspired. Does that make sense? It took me years, once we had bhikkhunis, to increase, the equity in the way even that they walked, and even in the way they went on arms round. Because sometimes people say that all monks, even if you've just been ordained that day, you have to go before such senior women, great meditators and great teachers. You ask those women, they say, we don't mind. But they've already let go of any pride they have. So nowadays, the last rains retreat over in Bodhinyana Monastery, we let the bhikkhuni who was staying in Jhana Grove, we let her walk on arms round in order of reins. And that was far more inspiring for people to see that. We checked afterwards, so it actually worked. So anyway, that's actually how we don't just teach Gaudama, but practice Gaudamas. Anyway, I hope that explains and shows what we're doing. And if you've got any sort of complaints, you know it's okay to disagree with the monk. Is it good to disagree with monks and say, are you sure about that, Ajahn Brahm? But fortunately now I have a lot of other senior monks, people like Ajahn Brahmali, and who's got a PhD. So you ask him and he'll quote this and quote that and quote something else. So it's valid. I recall a long time ago when I was sleeping, just before I doze off, I can feel my body floating upwards. Is this something related to meditation state? Thank you. If it really does float upwards and leave your body, sometimes I used to call that astral traveling. And if you do things like that, after a while you get quite bored. Because, so you go up, where are you going to go? And you don't go to somebody's room, because, I mean, that's just like perverted. But there was one guy, I remember, an interesting story. He was in Karnat prison farm, and he was like from Serbia many, many years ago. And he said when he was a kid, he remembers clearly he had something wrong with his body. He was having an operation, so he was under anesthetic. But then he kind of woke up under anesthetic because he floated out of his body. He had near-death experience, which is close to out-of-the-body experiences. He was only about 4, 5, or 6 years old, or something like that, and he saw his body, cut open, and the doctor was trying to find out the cause of the problem. And he knew, even though he had no medical knowledge, they were looking in the wrong place. And he just kind of wished, he said, made the determination. Don't look there, look over here. And one of the doctors did that. They just, almost as soon as he thought that, they moved their head. And they said, here's the problem. And because they found the problem in time, his life was saved. But once he came out of anesthetic, he said, from that time on, he could always leave his body whenever he wanted, float outside. For him, I could see it had a purpose. If he wanted to see a football match when he was in prison, or go to see a movie, it was no problem for him. The guards were looking at his cell, he was still there, he's not moving, he's just like sleeping, but nevertheless, his astral body was out watching a movie or something. And there was another fellow, he was Burmese. He was an aircon engineer, and he got a contract to do some aircon work over in Darwin, and his home was in Perth. He had an English wife. She wasn't like Buddhist like Burmese were Buddhist, but nevertheless she respected Buddhism. And what he did, ever since he was small, he had very powerful focus of mind. And he too could leave his body. And he said that he would, when he was working in Darwin, he missed his wife. She was English. And he would actually leave his body and check up on her, making sure she was faithful. And she told me this. She said, what I would do, I would feel that Keith, her husband, was around. Said, Keith, look, I'm being faithful. Don't bother me. Just go back to Darwin and have a sleep or whatever. And he knew that happened as well. So it does happen, but what are you going to do with it? So it's basically something which can happen, but you get bored with it after a while. In the book, Stillness Flowing, written by Ajahn Chah, the treatment that Ajahn Chah's Farang disciples set was quite extreme. It seems to me to be more like an abuse sometimes. But why are you guys to respect him so much? It was not abuse. There was one monk, I think you saw him recently, Ajahn Viradhamma. We saw him. He probably never told you this story, but when he went to one monastery, he really decided, just to go for broke, enlightenment or bust, that kind of thing. He's keeping so many Dhutanga practices. He volunteered to do it all at once. And when Ajahn Chah came to visit, this Ajahn Viradhamma had an epileptic fit. And he fell off the seat and cracked his head on the floor, and lots of blood came out. So they took him to a hospital. He wasn't badly damaged, but Ajahn Chah saw that. Ajahn said, what was he doing? And when they said how many ascetic practices he was doing all at once, basically Ajahn Chah banned that. The nature of practitioners in northeast Thailand was to do as less as possible. So Ajahn Chah needed to push them so that they could actually practice a bit more diligently. Westerners were the opposite. The Westerners, we practice too hard ourselves. And so Ajahn Chah had to keep an eye on us and say, don't do that. Relax more. Relax to the max. But you wouldn't say that to the northeastern monks. The northeastern culture, when I first went up to the northeast or into Laos, was so lazy. During the hot season, you go to the village for some reason or another, and you see most of the men were just laying on these little couches under their hut. You'd ask them, what are you doing? And they just living. Useless, sir. And that was why they were just so relaxed. And sometimes I admired that, because Malaysians or Westerners, I've never seen you anywhere near as relaxed as those villagers. If they didn't need to do anything, they wouldn't. There was rice in the storeroom, there was fish in the water, there was water in the paddy fields. What more do you want in life? And to this day, I always feel that there's a lot of wisdom in that simplicity and contentment of their lives. That's why Ajahn Chah kind of tried to push them. But Ajahn Chah would never push us that hard. I never thought so. Oh, and that's the first one.
There's a stack below the seat. Here.
Oh, they're not supposed to notice us. And next question. Does the first jhana must always have the elements of nimitta and body vanishing spirits? First jhana does not always have nimitta before it, but it's lovely to do it that way. Sometimes it doesn't always have breath before it, but sometimes when you get a little sequence, you know how it works, and little things to let go of one after the other. It makes it much easier to understand where you're going and where any problems arise. Sometimes a person just gets into a jhana very quickly. The body vanishing, yes, because you can't have a body awareness and be in a jhana. Is there any other element that must be present? I suppose mindfulness, contentment, joy. My goodness. If you are comfortable, then I'll begin. I experienced many bullies during my childhood from my grandfather and teacher. When I told them to my parents, their response was, it must be me being no good, thus they punish me. Either that or I get another round of punishments from my parents. This is where I learnt trust nobody, even though they are your parents. I also learnt that nobody trusts me, even though I spoke the truth. Thus, their teacher bullied me almost daily for years, and mostly verbally, sometimes physically, because she was my form teacher. She was a well-known teacher, reputable. Thus everyone is telling me that she punished me for my own good. As a kid, I kept asking myself, why am I born to this world? To be punished? Where is safe haven for me? When I came to know about Buddhism, it took me quite a while to accept Buddhism. The doctrine of karma does answer many of my questions. I took it as my past karma resulted me to have this experience, even though I take refuge in Triple Gem. But somehow I don't trust Buddha 100%. Maybe I don't trust myself. I have made that right choice. Thus these doubts trouble me a lot. How can I eradicate these doubts to Buddha? How should I trust myself? You mentioned about fear of happiness. I notice I have that. I have many experiences being scolded by adults for no reason when they are moody, seeing me playing happily. Thus my association with happiness is fear and pain. How to resolve this fear of happiness problem? And first of all, that I was surprised there was no punishment by an Ajahn. He would never hit you or beat you. You weren't forbidden to take food. If you were sick, he was so kind at finding the right food for you. And even just I asked for a pineapple when I really meant to ask for soap. He never scolded me. He just laughed because he thought it was genuinely funny. And so for years, that he was an embodiment of non-punishing. And so because of that, even though some monks deserved to be punished, I was quite surprised they weren't. He would never do things like that. And so he used kindness. And I saw that even from my own father. This is my biological father. He told me when I asked about my grandfather, paternal grandfather, who died in Liverpool during the Second World War, he would not talk about him. Please excuse the language here. He said, your grandfather was a bastard. And he said that as a term of abuse. And that kind of shocked me because my father would never speak like that. So why? He said because he was poor, he was a plumber. If he did make any money, he would spend it at the pub, come home drunk, take off his leather belt, and he'd whip any child that just happened to be there. And that hurt enough for a kid, for no reason at all, getting a belting. But that never hurt as much as when he saw his mother being belted for no reason, because he loved his mum, but he could not protect her. But the result of seeing that punishment because of drunkenness and poverty, that he made a vow, if ever he survived, and if ever he had children, which he did, myself and my brother, he would never punish us. A few times, we were young people in the same room, fighting, making a loud noise, and sometimes he would come in with a slipper, but he just couldn't hit us, because he made that vow. And that was a beautiful thing to see. And I loved my father for that, when he explained what he'd been through. And instead of visiting that punishment on others, he learned how it felt to be punished. And so he learned the value of the opposite, of kindness. And that's why he was one of those who taught me what kindness really meant. It doesn't matter who you are. Just say to yourself, the door of your own heart is open to you. Come in. You don't want to punish anybody. There's too much punishment and hurt in this world. And punishment is not how you make people better. You all know, because I've said it so many times, because I enjoyed telling it to myself, so I'll never ever forget it. But one of the best compliments I ever got was a telephone call from a senior prison officer. He said, I want to talk to you. He said, yes, it's me, Ajahn Brahm. Great, he said. Can you come back to my prison to teach? And I said, well, I'm really busy these days. I've got to go to Malaysia, to the PTF. I've got to go to all these other countries as well. And he said, no, I'll send somebody else, I said. He said, no, we want you. And of course I said, why me? And then he let on that he was soon to retire as a prison officer. But then he noticed something. All of the prisoners who went to my class, every one of them, never ever came back into prison. Zero recidivism. And he said, I can't ignore that, I saw it. I don't know what you're doing, I don't care, but come back and do it again. Because actually to see somehow people in jail who've done some terrible crimes, somehow you're kind enough to them. They realize they don't need to be punished anymore. A lot of times we punish ourselves. We don't think we're good enough. And my job was every one of these prisoners to make sure they felt they were good enough. 2 crooked bricks in the wall doesn't mean you're a bad bricklayer. And that's one of the reasons why at our local prison, Carnet Prison Farm, there was one murderer who was there and going around saying, he'd read that story of the 2 bad bricks. He said, it's only 2 murders, only 2 murders. There's so many other people I didn't murder. That doesn't make me a bad man. I thought that was so cute. Those murders have been done. You don't need to punish him for it anymore. He's got so much in his life. Now he wants to see the other part of himself, the good part. Punishment makes you keep thinking why you've been punished and think you're a bad person. You're not a bad person. You just made a mistake, that's all. And that's how you don't get any people going back to jail. They learn their lesson and do good afterwards. I still remember meeting one of my prisoner students. I may not finish these talks, but these are beautiful stories. That he was in jail for drug trafficking. And don't say that's a minor crime. That causes so much pain and difficulties for whole families when they get addicted to drugs. However, he grabbed me by the arm when I came early one day to the prison to teach. And then he took me to the schoolhouse, and there were all of these cards written by school children in the nearby primary school. And as he was showing them to me, he was pointing, "Dear Nick, hope you get out soon. please, when you get your day of release, please let us know and come and say hello to us. We enjoyed your company so much. Thank you for visiting us. And he was weeping, not crying, but really weeping. So what happened? And he said the headmistress of this primary school was told by the people in town that there were too many people even in primary school getting involved in drugs. And they wanted to do something, so even when they're not really fully into it yet, not in sort of high school, you tell all these children about the dangers of drugs. Most of these headmistresses or headmasters, they would get policemen or psychiatrists or people who got PhDs. Please excuse me, but to talk to the kids. But this headmistress, she said no. The prison is just a few kilometers away. I'm going to ask the governor of the prison, superintendent, can you please send a couple of prisoners down who are in jail because of drug dealing? Bring them in to teach our kids about the danger of drugs. Who knows more than those who have actually done it and felt the pain and the shame and the difficulty of losing years of their life? So one of these guys, Nick, he volunteered to go and teach these primary school kids. And you can understand how it really worked. This is people who have actually been there and felt it and know what actually happens, not through theory. And so they just gave it their all day. And when they came back, they had all these little cards and letters from the kids they taught. You just had to read that to know they'd really connected. And he kept on weeping and weeping and weeping. He was so emotional. You can imagine how great that is for someone in prison. Punishment doesn't work, but repaying your debts. He knew that a lot of those children, had heard and learned and understood what happens when you just for pleasure take a drug and you find out it hurts so much. So he was one of those prisoners, and I remember seeing him when I was waiting in Perth airport to pick up another visitor, and he was sitting there in a nice suit, and he said, I'm doing really well now, look at me. But I'm still meditating every day, Ajahn. I was still meditating. And so unless you see just what you can do, not punishing, but focusing on people's good points, encouraging those good points, and letting those good points grow. One of the other prisoners, he was over there at Jhana Monastery a week or two ago. I first invited him to actually be a cook on one of our retreats. I don't know if any of you went to that retreat, but it happened that our usual cook got a blood cancer, so couldn't come. So I was put in a spot. I needed to get a cook for the retreat. Who could I get? So I got this guy, Carl. And he was such an amazing cook. I remember one of the things he made a pizza. It's all vegetarian food there. A pizza, just from scratch, just from flour. He worked so hard, and he was such a great cook. I was amazed. And everybody else liked the food he made. And at the end of the retreat, like we'll probably do tomorrow, we'll thank all the cooks and the cleaners, all the people who made this possible. And so they wanted to thank Carl. But Carl wasn't there. So where's Carl gone? They said he's gone back into prison. He was on work release. He's in prison. What did he do? Multiple rape. And I allowed him to come and cook for everybody on the retreat. If you knew here the person cooking for you was on work release from prison for rape, would you trust the organisers anymore? You should do. I knew, I was the one who got Carl to come in, and he'd done this terrible act of rape when he was young, on drugs, and he got out of that a long time ago. There's no way in the world he'd ever do that again. I trusted him, and that trust was rewarded. I gave him, come on, you be the cook. And afterwards, when I told everybody at the very end of the retreat, that's what he was in jail for. They learned a great lesson of insight. Just because a person did it once doesn't mean they'll do it again. You don't judge a person for one or two terrible things they've done in life. A person is not a terrorist. They're a person who does a terrorist act. There's no such thing as a criminal. There's a person who's done a crime. When you actually see that, you don't have to punish them for the rest of their life. One stupid act they did which they regret. And I proved that. When Carl was there doing some whippersnipping to help with the fires at Jhana a few days ago. He's married now, he's a lovely man. He's very big too. So it's good value for money. Do you agree with that? I've tried it. Only by trying and letting people see it can they see that this is actually true. Forgiveness is kind of beautiful. And a lot of times if you're given the proper way, people never reoffend. In the sutta, Nanda Mata and Venerable Sai told Venerable Sai Buddha that she could get in and out of the jhanas easily. The Upaklesa Sutta also said excessive meditation was the cause for nimittas and jhanas to fall away. It's not excessive meditation, it's excessive something else. Either excessive effort, excessive wanting, but not excessive meditation. Meditation is what jhanas are. So the translation there is a bit inaccurate. How does one balance a meditation or right amount of meditation, for a better term? You don't balance it first of all, you find out what that term really means. You choose your right energy or right efforts. Too much efforts. Too little. What do I mean by effort? I kept on saying that effort is not a good word. I tell the monks at Bodhinyana Monastery, your effort stops once you're sitting on that cushion. It's the effort to do the meditation, to go and sit, find the time for it, to begin it. But if you really want to get the benefits of the meditation, once you've got your backside, on the seat or on the chair, now you start to let go. If you let go before you're even sitting on the chair, nothing happens. Much gratitude. In one sutta, the Buddha said that generosity enhances one's beauty, lifespan, amongst others. How does generosity increase one's lifespan, or one's appearance, etc.? Appreciates Ajahn's guidance of this. First of all, I don't know how many of you are still looking for a partner in life. If you want to be more beautiful, don't go to beauty parlors. Keep 5 precepts and be generous. It's much cheaper than wasting money at beauty parlors. If you're generous, don't you look happy? Can you smile more? And smiling is one of the best forms of beauty. When I see somebody smile, they look really nice and attractive. Other people want to look at you. So if you want to be attractive, smile, tell your kids that. They don't have to worry paying money on sort of all sorts of waste of time stuff. But also the generosity. It's kind of weird, but sometimes that when people are just generally kind, it's as if the body becomes enhanced with beauty and kindness and generosity. Other beings like you, even animals. There's sometimes over in Perth, there's so many kangaroos, and they get to know when any monk is going on retreat, and they come round to the hut. They get to know there's like good food here for them. Even if there's plenty of grass, they will always stop by. You know what one of their favourite foods is? Pizza. Well, I've done that myself. I had a slice of pizza left over, so I put it down there and put some carrots and some like healthy food on top. And I saw like apples. They don't mind apples. I saw the kangaroo come in, having a look, pushing aside the apple, pushing aside the carrot, and getting the pizza between its two paws. They know how to eat pizza now. And I think they're the only kangaroos in the whole of Perth eat pizza. Don't tell them it's unhealthy for them. It's their choice. Anyway, it's nice to see them happy. And because, they're unafraid, they let you have a look, and you can laugh, and they don't sort of take offense. Mahayana Buddhism worships more than one Buddha and many bodhisattvas, whereas Theravada Buddhism, we honor Sakyamuni Buddha only. No, we don't. When I bow to the Buddha, I'm honoring and worshipping virtue, peace, and compassion. What the Buddha signifies for me. You don't just worship sort of an idea or a person. You worship what they did. You give it worth so that you too can grow in virtue, peace, and compassion. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so the questions are finished now. Yesterday's questions, now we've got today's. Well, you wrote them, it's not my fault. There we go. 8:30, okay. Dear Ajahn, thank you so much for your kind sharing this whole week. So far, your sharing into insights for what I gather are experiences, personal ones, for the years you spent at Ajahn Chah's monastery. The sharing has been excellent, but could you also please share 2 or 3 most recent spiritual insights that you attained at Bodhinyana monastery, Jhana growth, for the last 5 years? Thank you. Even what you learnt over in BGF and also at Buddhist Gem Fellowship and also in Wisdom Park. What you learn here, or even any source of teachings, is that sometimes whenever you give a talk, I keep on having to remind myself of this, sometimes you say something and it might not be so accurate, sometimes maybe people misunderstand you, and sometimes you look at your talk and think, I could have done better. But then again, what I learn here, what I've learned many times, you can also do much worse. Those little stories which I tell because I did this when I was young, about the two bad bricks in the wall. If I give a talk and I don't pronounce it properly, or you misunderstand it, or actually say it wrong, and it's two mistaken quotes in a talk, does that make it a bad talk? How many times do you criticize yourself? And if you do, why? You just remember two little things which you say, I could have done better. But you do so many other things in one talk for 2 hours, so many statements. Why should I ever feel unhappy about two things which I could have said much better? You never do. So that way, I can maintain my happiness when I go back to my room. I don't think, oh, terrible Ajahn Brahm, you blew it again. Why did I say that, stupid Ajahn Brahm? You see, why did I burp then? I told you the wrong time to burp, you stupid Ajahn Brahm. Instead, you let go of two bad bricks, so you can also enjoy the good things which you remember. And this is an important part of life here. You may say that many things which you've heard on this retreat have been inspiring, but I'm sure there's one or two things you've heard which weren't inspiring. Be honest. Does that really negate from the inspiring things you've heard? Giving retreats like this is like offering a buffet. So many little pieces of wisdom. You don't have to accept all the food in the buffet. Otherwise, you'll end up much worse than me. And even if there's some parts of this which you thought was wrong, or shouldn't have said that, nevertheless, you look upon it years later and you think, now I understand why that was important. All the stuff which I rejected from Ajahn Chah at the beginning, and now I see which is so beautiful. I have so much gratitude for that. So this is one of the reasons why be very careful on this retreat or other retreats to be too, too judgmental. And don't be judgmental of you. Did you have a good retreat?
Yes.
You're judgmental again, aren't you? That's a difficulty, that at the end of a retreat, you go home, you see some of your friends, and they ask you, how was it? And if you say, terrible, you feel such a fool. You wasted all this time and even gave a donation, had to spend money to have a really terrible time at this retreat. And so you always say, well, I learned something. What did you learn? Never to go back again. A lot of the time people make things up. But anyway, tomorrow, that's one of the reasons why we have the group photograph tomorrow. Please, in the photograph, be honest. If you're miserable, look miserable. And I expect some of you should be miserable. It's the last day of the retreat, it's finishing. Oh. I remember seeing that years ago, it's very tough with passing the retreats. And people said, but look, they look so happy. It's the last day of the retreat, look how happy they look. Because they're going home now. They're thinking about the dinner they can eat tonight. So really you should have photographs in the middle of a retreat. That'll be much more revealing. Let's get back to questions, Ajahn. Thank you for your teachings. Regarding meditation, there have been several instances where the pressure when observing the breath vanishes. Subsequently, restlessness and wanting arises, interrupting mindfulness. How do I overcome this? Thank you. Sometimes turn the pressure off slowly and stay in the present moment. In the present moment, actually thinking can't really arise. We're thinking about something in the future, planning something, or remembering something which happened in the past. One thing which I haven't taught, and I thought about just when I was in my room this afternoon, is that sometimes, years and years ago, I noticed that the present moment awareness, which is a beautiful feature of meditation, was kind of smudged. In other words, it wasn't precise. It was like looking through a telescope and it wasn't properly focused. And I remember during the meditation using that as a simile and just twisting, the eyepiece or the end of the telescope just slightly. Everything came in real proper focus. That's just like the present moment awareness. If you've got a little bit of past, a little bit of future, and not really precisely in this moment, that allows hindrances to arise. A bit of thought about the future or memories about the past disturb what you're doing now. The awareness is smudged. So I remember you can't actually do that during that part of meditation, but me talking about it now will probably make you, when you feel that your awareness is not really right in there, you just twist so slightly and everything gets properly focused. And then the piti sukha doesn't vanish, but gets even sharper and more beautiful. I hope that helps. This is a really good question. Thank you. Oh no, it's inside. So please excuse me for messing around, but I like to have fun too. It gives me energy, otherwise I get bored. Actually, I don't get bored. Whenever I see all these questions, and this has 5 parts to the question. The 5 hindrances. Does spraying mosquito spray in my room in the middle of the night as I was woken up by mosquitoes buzzing in my ears consider breaking precepts? It does. It's killing, intentionally. But the best thing to do is to try and make sure the windows are all closed earlier. I've had no problem with any mosquitoes or any bed bugs or anything in my room. You know what I do? I turn the aircon on so low. The mosquitoes, one comes into the room, "Ooh," and they go next door to your room instead. I'm sorry. But if you can, so keep them out so they don't come in the first place. That's much better. I didn't realize here in Malaysia you do have problems with mosquitoes. In the BGF they don't have problems with mosquitoes in town. Because I think the neighbours do all the spraying. Is that right? I don't know.
The city council does a spray named as Angie.
Okay, yes.
They would spray the area.
Yeah. So what I would do, yes, it is breaking a precept, but you can understand why. You haven't got bad intentions. It's not the same as killing a human being because they've hurt you. So it's less bad karma, but see if you can, if you have to spray, then say, look, I'm not doing this because I hate you or because I have ill will against you, just to protect my health and the health of my family. So please, mosquitoes, May you have a beautiful rebirth somewhere. Give kindness, even actually share some of the karma which you make. And then to the mosquitoes who gave their life so I could be healthy. That's the best you can do. As I said, in life, it's so difficult to live a life not at the expense of something else. You do your very best. What about spraying at the ants when a group of ants are entering my kitchen from the window? I wouldn't want ants to be invading my kitchen whenever I am preparing food. Sometimes, why are the ants there? Because sometimes the kitchen's not kept clean enough. If you kept it clean before and after the meals, then they're more unlikely to enter anyway. And the other thing to do, you have to have confidence it works, is actually just talk to the ants and ask them, look, I don't want to kill you, I don't want to harm you, but even the council regulations means I might have to if you keep coming in like this. You'd be surprised if you're good meditators and you'd like to keep precepts, how those ants will respond. There was a monk, a forest monk, Ajahn, many years ago. And I love this story, that on Tudong he came close to a village and said he was going to stay there that night in the forest, and so they could prepare food for him in the morning. But they asked, can we listen to a talk tonight? He said, yeah, sure. So in 1 hour or 2 hours time, they were going to come to where he was sitting to listen to a talk, a Dhamma talk. And so he sat down and started to meditate, but as he sat down, he started to feel red ants crawling up his body. And they had very painful bites. And as they came up his body, his legs, underneath his robes, they were biting him. It was so painful. He found himself jumping up and running away. And then he thought, this is not how a monk is supposed to behave. So he went back to where he was sitting before and sat down right in the middle of these thousands of ants swarming around. But then he changed his meditation object to loving kindness. He was a very well-known monk, and also in no way that he would ever lie. So he sat down there, and these ants started biting him again. It was almost unendurable, but he kept on doing loving kindness until the ants stopped biting him. First of all, less and less, and then none at all. And then he could feel the ants actually walking down his legs and off his body. And then he had a beautiful meditation for 1.5 hours. And then, because he told himself he had to come out after 1.5 hours or so, the villagers will come. So when he opened his eyes, he saw the villagers approaching, and they were dancing. And he thought, this is a strange village custom. When they come and see a monk, they do this dancing. And as he looked more clearly, he found out they weren't dancing. They go, ow, ow, ow. And they were being bitten by these millions of red ants. And these red ants had formed like a circle around him, but about 1 meter in front and behind, like a no man's land. They were protecting him. It's one of the weirdest things he'd seen. When he was kind to those ants, they hadn't disappeared. They decided to stay around him as he was meditating, 1 meter radius circle all around him, to protect him. When the laymen people came, they didn't realize that the lay people were not going to harm him. So they bit the lay people. It's amazing just how animals can understand monks, but they don't understand you guys. Does using someone's things for brief moments without asking consider stealing? I will return the things in its original place after using it. Usually not. If you're not just taking it as your possession, and it's not stealing, it's borrowing. And that's one of the reasons why, for monks and monastic communities, I keep telling my monks this. Look, I'm away from Bodhinyana Monastery for 9 days. Actually, more than that. So if any of you monks, need something in my hut or my cave, please take it. We share. And if they do take something of mine which they need, like a clock, or I don't know what else I've got which is valuable, and I'll be so happy that somebody else has made use of it. You don't attach to things. It's great to be able to share. It's the same in a family. There's something which you need in my room, please take it. I really recommend the 3-in-1 coffee from Ipoh. That's really good. So, if you need some, please take it. Because it's sharing. If monks can't share, why not? Today is the last night together with Ajahn. I feel kind of sad. I didn't finish all these questions, but I did 2 out of the 3. 2 out of the 5. Is that okay? Today is the last night together with Ajahn. I feel kind of sad, but I'm very happy for the past 7 days because able to listen to Ajahns talk live. I'm also happy because I get to detach from the world for 7 days. No phone ringing. Tomorrow I'll have to go back to reality and work my butt off. You're not going back to reality. This is reality. You go back to the false world. Why do I say the false word? People just wear false hairdos. They use dyes on their hair. And they wear fake clothes. And they're not really as real as they are here when you keep precepts. I always say this is the real world. And if you go to shopping centres, they have scents there to try and make you buy something. All the incredibly bright colours. Sometimes when I look inside shopping centres and think, my God, there's like shopping hells. Is that true in Malaysia? Shopping malls, not shopping hells. They're so bright. It kind of is tiring. Anyway, yes, so I work your butt off. Can you not work more efficiently? In other words, don't think about things too much. Just do it. And you don't get so tired or so negative. Okay, hope we will meet again in the nearest future. We will meet again tomorrow morning. Dear Ajahn, can I read Dharma book while answering nature's call? No. There are sometimes that people have problems, with urine and the other thing which comes out. Isn't it nicer to be mindful and kind when you're going to the toilet? And then you're actually much healthier. You don't force anything. And that means that you live a longer, more peaceful life. So usually, it's best not to. Especially if somebody's here in Wisdom Park. Because if you're reading a Dhamma book or sitting in the toilet, someone outside, hey, come on, hurry up, I need to go as well. You're not practicing compassion. Thank you very much for your skillful teaching on meditation. I have some full circle now, starting on samatha with and vipassana with you and ending with jhana. Stillness. I have no excuse now to lessen the process of enlightenment irons to go before achieving sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. With joy and bliss and always. Excellent. Carry on. Just curious to ask, are you a cat? If you are, be careful, because curiosity killed the cat. May I ask why it is that you chose Ajahn as your teacher and subsequently be ordained under him? Anything that has inspired you? Thank you. One of the reasons was that I'd mentioned this, he could read your mind, and his way of teaching was so amazing, profound and simple. It didn't give so much like deep Abhidharma teachings, but something he could put the Dharma into different ways. I haven't mentioned this story to you yet. This was one of the most inspiring of those events with Ajahn Chah. When he started getting sick, we built a sauna for him in Wat Banana Chat. We found that in the old days, in the time of the Buddha, they had saunas in monasteries. So we wanted to build one for him. Many of the monks worked hard to build that sauna because they wanted to use one. But also we knew that if we had a sauna for Ajahn Chah, we were helping increase his health. And also he would come every week for his sauna to give a Dhamma talk. And it worked perfectly. He would come once a week for his sauna, but before the sauna he'd give a Dhamma talk to the Sangha who happened to be there. Not always his talks were amazing, but this day his talks were one of the best. And I was so inspired after the talk, I couldn't help it but go behind the hall, find a quiet place, sit cross-legged for 2 hours, blissing out. Really nice meditation. There were plenty of other monks do the duties of looking after Ajahn Chah at the sauna. And so when I came out of my meditation, the first thought was, maybe Ajahn Chah, I can still do a service for him. So I walked to the sauna, but I was too late. So as I was walking, Ajahn Chah and the Thai attendant were walking the other way. And I saw him, and I just went off the path a little bit so he could pass. And that's when he looked at me. I'd just come out of a beautiful meditation. And so Ajahn Chah, he was a great teacher, he noticed that. And he read my mind. I don't mind saying this, but you could feel him inside your mind, having a look. And for once, I didn't mind. My mind was nice and pure and blissed out, and no hindrances there. So he had a look. He wasn't going to say, are you thinking of your girlfriend back in London or anything like that? because I wasn't. The mind was really ready to be looked at by your teacher. And so then he stopped looking inside. Say, how did I know who was reading my mind? You could feel it. It's one of those certain things you knew. And then afterwards, he looked at me and said, Brahm, your full name. Why? He did it quite fiercely. Why? And I replied, I don't know. I was a stupid monk. And he just laughed, as they did, like when I mispronounced papaya, thinking it was soap. So he just, pineapple. So you did it too, well done. You don't scold or punish. It's a nice opportunity to laugh. So he laughed, but then he stopped laughing. He looked at me again. He's obviously getting serious again. And he said, Brahmavamsa, if anyone ever asks you that question again, I'll tell you the right answer. The answer to the question why, from one of the greatest meditators of the last century. The answer to the question why, he said, is Mai Mi Arai. No, he said, there's nothing. There's nothing. And he looked at me with this beautiful kindness and softness and said, do you understand? And I said, yes. And he looked at me, no you don't. That was really a put down from your teacher, just coming out of a nice meditation. He tried his hardest to enlighten you, and you were too stupid, to understand what he was saying. Something so simple. Why? There's nothing. But of course, the situation was so powerful. Just come out of a deep meditation. This is the teaching from your great master. Not quoting from a sutta, but you can actually see where it's coming from. And I never forget that. It became those treasured moments with Ajahn Chah. So, why? Do you understand? But anyway, that's why I loved Ajahn Chah. He did things like that which went right to the point of things and left you with teachings you'll never find in any book. Thank you for your teaching. May I ask why? You still haven't understood. Why is the end much clearer? Why is the mind much clearer in the morning? Why do I get more inspirations with meditating in the morning? Is the mind different in the morning and in the evening? Do you encourage morning or evening meditations? What I would encourage you to do now, because it's December, the winter time, is actually just to go to Antarctica, where the morning lasts for 6 months. And then you have such a long morning. To see how you've got a good chance of maybe getting enlightened. Now, sometimes the morning time here, you've had a good rest, the air is clear, and also it's cool. Mornings are some of my favourite times of the day. You're not so tired, there's not so much heat in the room, and morning you're more fresh. Great time to meditate. Does the phrase, so this is, that is, this is not, that is not, only apply to cause and effect? Thank you. It does apply to cause and effect. In other words, I think in logic theory, it's there was actually a word for that. I remember just when I was teaching dependent origination some time ago. I remember saying that necessary and sufficient conditions. If this is, that means that this is a sufficient condition. If this is, then that's for that. If this is not, that is not, that's the necessary condition. If you don't have this, the other thing can't happen. So it's just like logic. And actually formal logic, which you sometimes learn at university, it was reflecting how the Buddha taught. So, but especially that's all there is, just causes and conditions. Nothing being caused. Dear Ajahn Brahm, may I ask if Theravada, Mahayana and Tibetan monks observe the same precepts, or there are any difference based on their teaching regarding cultural differences? Even Theravada monks don't all keep the same precepts. How many monks do you know who accept money? Many monks don't. So after a while, we actually look and see what precepts are really important. And after a while, we find most of them are. Nearly all of them are. But no monk or nun is absolutely perfect. Look at the way I wear my robes. This robe is way too big. What is the right size for robes? How many robes should you wear? So some monks do different things, have different styles of robes. That's why recently one of our monks, Venerable Sunyo, has been wearing a very smaller type of robe, which is probably much more closer to how the Buddha wore robes. But nevertheless, we don't do exactly the same. But if we have a different interpretation, like one interpretation which I have because I follow my teacher Ajahn Chah, which Ajahn Brahmali doesn't have. You may have noticed, and thank you for doing this, you haven't offered me any coconut juice in the afternoon or evening. Ajahn Brahmali would accept it, I don't. The only reason is it's an interpretation of the Vinaya, and Ajahn Chah always said, no, don't accept any. And I do it out of respect for Ajahn Chah. But I will never criticize Ajahn Brahmali. He said, if that's how you interpret it, it's within reason, so fine. You can do that. So we don't do things always the same. Similar, but not the same. And anyway, why do I need coconut water? Look at my size already. That would make it even worse. So that's just an example. Dear Ajahn, many monks, many thanks for all of your guidance and sharing. Thank you. Appreciate it if you could demonstrate the right sitting meditation posture and walking meditation. Is it true that meditation can be done any place and any time as well as any way? Yes. As long as we are in a mindful stillness? Yes. What was that? OPP. Should not only thank you still remember to return your kindness to many people. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, sitting meditation, however you may feel comfortable, walking meditation. How many of you know the kangaroo walking meditation method? You do? Could you stand up? No? Does anybody want to do it for her? Any volunteers? Ah, come on. It's actually on the internet anyway. Kangaroo walking meditation. I usually get somebody to demonstrate it for me. Is anyone brave enough to do that? But once in Penang, no one would do that for me, so I demonstrated it. And as soon as that happened, the camera started rolling. But anyway, the kangaroo walking meditation, because when Buddhism goes to different countries, it's got to adapt to the local conditions. So even kangaroo walking meditation. So what you do, when you stand at the beginning, you don't put your hands on your lap or behind your back, you put them in front of you. And you don't walk, you hop mindfully, and then you do another hop, and another hop. And what that does on long retreats is that sometimes that people get a bit bored and they get negative sometimes. And then when one person does that in a walking meditation, it cheers people up and gives them a boost of energy. So who's going to try that? No? Okay, I'll have to do it then. Here we go. Oh my goodness. Good exercise. Oops. So you put your hands up like this, very mindfully. But if you do that while you're walking, people who see you, they smile and they get happy. That's our purpose of it. Listen, when you put joy in whatever you do, that actually brings up energy as well. So that's why we do it that way. Okay. Shall we keep going on for a little bit? Okay. Please don't ask me to do that again. The second part of my question, what's your first part? Okay. About whether monks participating in singing Buddhist songs was considered breaking a monastic precept, was omitted in your explanation last night. I appreciate your advice. Many thanks. Singing Buddhist songs? Which songs do you mean? Buddhist hymns? The Dhamma hymns? Well, they could be okay, but I don't know really which ones they are. For Dhamma hymns, the expert is Victor. Is that sort of good, singing Dhamma hymns? I don't think it's breaking the 8 precepts.
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Because it's not for entertainment, it's more for like inspiration. So I think that should be okay. What's your favourite hymn?
The light in your hand.
What?
Little pal.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Come on, do 1 minute of it.
And you can't sing anymore.
Okay. Well, croak it. As long as everyone joins in, if you can.
Oh. What is that?
Again. At the edge of the forest, where the spring water flows, in search of nirvana, that is where I would go. Watching life's little drama with a calm repose. At the edge of the forest, that is where I would go.
Thank you. So what do you think? Is that breaking precepts? Not at all. Because it's something which is inspiring and encourages people to practice Dhamma more and to meditate more. So thank you, Victor, for that. When I meditate, there is tension in the head and neck. The neck is stiff and painful. I know that this happens because of wanting. I try to relax all the time, but it didn't help. Please help me, thank you. First of all, I want to change the posture. Don't just meditate the same way all the time. And even, find, like go into your bedroom and meditate on the bed or something. Do more walking meditation so you get kind of loose. Do yoga. Yoga can really help. So there's other ways of dealing with those problems. Don't just endure. Seeing if you can actually get someone to give you a shoulder massage if possible. So that's a way to look after the body. Dear Ajahn, thank you for your teachings. May I ask, what is the difference of Vajrayana Buddhism? Is it all right to practice Vajrayana Buddhism? Is it all right to practice Theravada Buddhism? Or is it all right to practice Buddhism? How many Buddhas were there? 3. There's only one Buddha. So they all taught, just follow what the Buddha said. But there were some teachings of Vajrayana Buddhism which are usually very helpful. You've seen that a lot of times, I haven't on this retreat, but I teach the 1,000-petal lotus simile. You heard me teach that before? It's supposed to be from Vajrayana Buddhism, but then you can adapt it. How does a lotus open up? It needs the warmth and light of the sun to open up. How do you open up in meditation to go deep inside? You use the warmth of kindness and the light of mindfulness, the kindfulness. And if you do that, you open up slowly, stage by stage, and go deep inside. Quite often, the last global conference on Buddhism which I did was over in Singapore. We had Mingyur Rinpoche was there as well. So he's a kind of Vajrayana Buddhist who, can think outside of the box and is very, very popular these days because he's a Buddhist who can relate to all other types of Buddhists. So we had a wonderful time there in Singapore last time. How many of you were there on that event with Mingyur Rinpoche and my mate Bernard Carr, the associate of Stephen Hawkins, Ajahn Brahmali, and I was there? Had a wonderful time. So sometimes when you get someone who knows what they're talking about, then they're worth listening to, no matter where they're from. How to pay back the bad karma done in previous life in a better way, rather than going through the suffering process in this life. Do you have to pay it back? There's two ways you can deal with bad karma in the past. One is the old simile of a spoonful of salt. If you put it in a cup, then it makes the whole thing really salty and it really tastes terrible. But if you put the salt in a whole swimming pool or lake of water, you can hardly taste it. So one way of dealing with the bad karma of the past is to dilute it with lots and lots of good karma in this life. And so the past bad karma, you experience it, but it's just so diluted you can hardly feel it. And the other way, which is obviously preferable, is if you understand the Dhamma and become a stream winner, much of the karma you've done in the past becomes a hosi karma that was. It can't get to you anymore, can't affect you. For example, that whatever bad karma you've done, a stream winner cannot be reborn in the lower realms anymore. Hell realms, animal realms are not possible for you anymore. Why? That was a question which I remember asking. It took a long time to understand the answer. Even karma can be forgiven. If you understand this idea of a sense of self, you don't need to always be carrying these huge weights of past karma around with you forever. You can literally drop it. It's a hard thing to do for people to forgive and let go. But once you see examples of that, it encourages you to let go more and more and more. Why do you burden yourself with this sense of pain and disappointment of the things which you did in the past? The Buddha kept on saying you learn from them and you let them go. Acknowledge, forgive, and let go. Can you do that?
Yes.
It's a hard thing to do. Because that's especially someone very close to you, like a mother or father. It doesn't matter who's wrong. If you hurt them, it's so hard to let that go. Even though your mother and father say, "Daughter, please let it go. It didn't matter so much, so you couldn't be there when I passed away. Just, you're a good person. Just, I love you, I care for you. I don't want you to suffer anymore." And that's something kind of beautiful. So if you're a stream winner and understand the law of karma very deeply, you're no longer burdened by many of those pains of the past. When you understand the Dhamma, you can let it go. That makes sense? If you can't do that, you better make a lot of good karma and just dilute it. What is Buddha's way to handle demise case? When there are family members, relatives passed away, must we invite monks to chant at home and during funeral services? If we are unable to invite monks, what can the family members do or chant? If there's usually monks or nuns somewhere around who can help do those services for you. And if not, there are lay groups available. I think there was a group over in they were in KL somewhere, and because I remember just supporting them, and the chief priest also supported them. They got Kesri Dhammananda, so they could do lay people do most of the chanting for when family members really got sick or even died, and they didn't charge. It was done by donations only. And I remember just supporting them as much as I possibly could, because it's a very pure, wonderful thing to be able to do. It doesn't always need to be a monk or a nun. But if it's a good monk or a good nun, they can take away a lot of the pain of people who are suffering when somebody passes away. But please don't overburden the monks or the nuns, otherwise they may pass away. And what chant to do? Do the sorts of chants which inspires you, or which inspired the person who passed away. If you don't know it, I'm sure you can find a recording of it somewhere, and then you can play that at their funeral. And those are the sorts of things which inspires you and inspires the people who have passed away. There was a saying that when someone died, we shouldn't move the body in the next 12 hours. Is the saying true, and why? Sometimes the Vajrayana used to say that. Theravada never did, Mahayana never did that. And if you feel that your, say, loved one was a Vajrayana, all you need to do is just ask permission. Please, we have to move you. Is it okay if I move you now?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. So, but anyhow, of course, there's no bad karma involved. So, and usually that was based on the idea that when a person dies, it takes a while for them to actually to leave the body. But that's not always true. Sometimes people leave a body almost immediately. And if they are moved, it doesn't really hinder it too badly. Dear Ajahn, in one of your talks you mentioned that the best Dhamma talk you ever heard in this life is a talk given by the Venerable Jnana Vimala. Other than the beer garden incident, what else was in that talk? I can't remember. It was so many years ago. But I remember just coming out of that talk and just thinking, wow, that was really inspiring. It was totally unexpected. And it was clear, precise, accurate, and I really appreciated that. Sometime later, I had a dream, a vivid dream just before I woke up in the morning, of Ajahn giving me a talk. And this was the time he was in a coma. He wasn't passed away yet, but he couldn't teach. And so when I heard it and recognized it in this vivid dream, I thought, I must remember this. I must remember this. Ajahn Chah giving me an inspiring talk. And that was throughout the talk, I must remember it. And then when I did woke up, I forgot everything. And I look back upon that as when you want something, you stop it happening. But that was actually fascinating that actually occurred. Okay, yeah. Okay. How are you going? Okay.
What about you? Are you tired? If you are tired, yeah.
I'm tired, but I'm not too tired. I'll do a couple more answers and then I'll give in. Is there black magic? Yes, I remember somebody gave me black magic, and I passed it on, I think, to Venerable Chanda's mother in London Buddhist Vihara because she liked that type of chocolate. But interestingly, all those cases of black magic which I have seen, real ones, they cannot affect you if you keep your precepts. Precepts make you invulnerable to black magic. And there was one of those cases. There was this young woman who would always go to Wat Banana Chat every moon day. And one morning, as she was washing her face, instead of her face in the mirror, she saw a monster's face. And this was the lady who kept her precepts. And so she wasn't lying, she wasn't hallucinating, she actually saw a monster. Ugh. And so she came and told the monks. And so the monks went to that lady's house for a dana. And one of the senior monks of Ajahn, who was there, he was like leading the Sangha there. And then there was another woman who just fainted during the chanting. And when they brought her around, they found she wasn't her normal self. She'd been possessed by this monster. And so they asked her, "Who are you? What do you want?" And she said, this person in a trance, said, "I'm the monster. I've been contracted to kill that young woman. And I've been trying for years. And I haven't even been able to get close to her because her precepts are just too good, too pure." And so the head monk, his name was Ajahn, the head monk there said, "You're never going to be able to kill her." He said, "The best thing you should do is I will give you the 5 precepts and you have to pass away." And this spirit monster, he was smart enough, had been trying for years to get close to her. He accepted that. So Ajahn gave this woman the 5 precepts. It was actually the spirit actually taking them. And then she came out of her trance and the spirit died, disappeared, never came back again. And the truth was that she was a young woman, someone in Warren had fallen in love with her and wanted to marry her. She refused him. So she said, "If you won't marry me, you won't marry anybody." And so hired a spirit doctor to get this monster, this yaka, to be able to kill her. It never worked. So black magic does exist, it's very rare. If you're ever afraid of it, please keep your precepts and you'll be totally safe. Okay, last question. Do you regard present influences such as Sadhguru and Eckhart Tolle as the awakened ones? No. I read about Sadhguru as emerging, awakened, enlightened after meditating for days, maybe even weeks without food, etc., hibernating state. As for Eckhart Tolle, at one stage he was very depressed, almost suicidal, but he overcame it. After being awakened, enlightened, he came out with the book, The Power of Now, which has become very popular today. What is your opinion about these two? Sadhu for all your guidance and teachings. You're awesome. So Eckhart Tolle I've seen, but some of the stuff he says is interesting, but it's very much like God-based. Well, the book which I read, he hasn't got the same depth of wisdom, and I don't know if he can meditate and let go. Same with Sadhguru. Somebody told me some stories about him, which made me have some doubts about any attainment which he has. But a lot of times, if you talk to them deeply, there are some things they say which is a bit strange. But anyway, please make up your own minds and don't just believe someone because they've got very good PA. In other words, like they've got good marketing behind them. Now that especially Buddhism has been getting popular in Western countries, there's many people like riding the waves of spirituality. It's a great way of making money. So a lot of times, if any guru sort of attaches money to what they're doing, then that's a big red flag. Check people's precepts, check the fact that they're doing this not to make money, live a nice lifestyle, but they're doing this in order to help others. They really are selfless and kind. Then it's maybe a good teacher to investigate and even follow. Does that make sense? Phew. So thank you. And I apologize for these, because I know as I get more tired that I don't give good answers. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, only 4 questions left. 4 happens to be the unlucky number in Chinese. So that's why these ones haven't been answered. Never mind, maybe next time I come to Wisdom Park. Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.